All right, welcome back. Now, we've just seen some of the risks that exist for children that might venture on some of these platforms. So what are key stakeholders doing to ensure children are safe online? Well, joining me in studio to my immediate left is Evelyne Kasina, CEO and founder of Eveminet Solutions, an IT consultancy firm. And she's also the Tik Tok safety partner in sub-Saharan Africa. And joining us as well is Patricia Muchiri, the head of Consumer Affairs Division at the Communications Authority of Kenya. Ladies, thank you so much for coming in. First and very quickly, your initial reactions to what you saw on that story. I mean, you interact quite a bit with TikTok, Facebook, any other social media platform, Evelyne?
My initial reactions, I think, were shock and sadness. Sadness because I know there's a lot that can be done in terms of ensuring that age-inappropriate content does not get into our children's terrains.
Right.
But a lot of sadness because once they have already consumed that content, then what? Yeah.
Patricia?
My initial reaction is the weight and responsibilities of organizations such as Communications Authority of Kenya, other state actors, non-state actors, on what requires to be done to basically facilitate the momentum, but at the same time ensure that the children and youth of this country are safe online. So it's a big responsibility. It's a wake-up call. To all of us.
You know, for someone who's not in the space like you two, I'm an outsider looking in, it would seem that it's the wild, wild west. It's so hard to be able to regulate, to know what's going on there. I mean, when I accessed TikTok, for instance, I didn't log in. So they had no idea whether I was 18 or not. And you hit the live feature and you are met with that kind of content. But Evelyne, I mean, what would you say is the current state of online safety in this country right now?
To be honest, it's nothing to celebrate because bad actors are finding it very easy to access vulnerable children. They are finding it, our children are just on their face for them to just do what they would want to do. I do believe also there's a lot of sophistication when it comes to harmful content. A lot of the way children are being groomed, the status we used to have maybe 2-3 years ago, even just before COVID, it has really escalated. So you find that even if there were content moderators, the sophistication of harm, it bypasses their faces because sometimes it is something that would look like such an innocent topic, but it has to have somebody to click onto it to see, okay, this is actually not really good content for children.
So would the moderators be overwhelmed, for instance, with that content? Because some of the stuff was pretty explicit.
Yes, absolutely. And you know, sometimes I also believe how we contextualize what is harmful is different for different jurisdictions. And you see a platform like TikTok that is global, it has to have global standards. So as a country, I think we need to start looking at how to ensure that we customize what we feel within our laws and our culture and our values is inappropriate for our state. But then you realize even when our children go online, they're not just Kenyans, they become global citizens. So yes, they will still bypass the protocols, they will still create and access content from wherever. So it's a balance, and I don't know how we would strike it, but I think there's more that needs to be done.
No, certainly, and we'll talk a bit later on about what you're doing to help parents as well create those controls. But Patricia, from the standpoint of the regulator, where are we?
That's a good question. Let me start by laying the foundation. We have over 66 million mobile subscriptions as at 31st of March this year. We have a mobile penetration rate as a country of 130, actually well over 100. And in terms of the smartphones, already in use in Kenya, we have over 29.4 million smartphones. So that picture paints the exponential growth of technology in our space, the possibilities, the opportunities. We all agree that technology has completely changed how we live, how we go about our day-to-day. So having laid those numbers, it is not surprising that out of this picture, you have the kind of challenges that come with rapid growth of the ICT sector. Right. So as a regulator, we're doing a couple of things. We developed a flagship program in 2015, and that flagship program has many facets. We've continuously had media awareness campaigns. We're in the process of developing child online protection guidelines, and we've just finished stakeholder consultations. We are at the onset of undertaking a national COP survey with a large sample size that will have lay a baseline for the country in terms of these risks and vulnerabilities. We work with platform service providers like Tik Tok, Meta, and all the rest. Yeah. And we have a very close collaborative framework. So I think what needs to be done is we need to do more. We need to do an intervention, if required, on policy and legislative instruments, strengthen those. We need to bring parents, guardians, and children on board.
What kind of intervention, legislatively at least?
Actually, as a country, we have a very strong policy and legislative framework when it comes to internet safety. Mm-hmm. We have a national ICT policy that speaks to COP safety. We have a national plan of action, which was launched, I think, last year, that is already in play. Closer home at the Communications Authority of Kenya, we have the Kenya Information and Communications Act and the Consumer Protection Regulation. We have KSAT, which is the center, the Coordination Center for Cyber Security, where you can report any incidences or cyber issues. So in terms of the policy and legislative framework, I want to feel we have a strong foundation. So I think more needs to go into awareness creation, into conversations such as the one we're having here, so that we are all on board in terms of what we could do better. That would be my take.
Evelyne, you know, when you look at the regulatory space, the laws that have been put in place, are they effective? And even when it comes to reporting, do you find there is a response, something's actually done?
Well, there are laws in place, and I think what needs to be done is to have a lot of awareness so that people actually get to know that if an incident was to happen to me, this is the procedure I will take for me to be able to report. Yes, when people do report, something happens. Okay. Sometimes it could take time, but I can assure you that there's always a 360 way that an incident is reported and it is resolved. Maybe from our perspective, if we help, like for instance, a child to report a case, we might not know how it was resolved, but the child would give us feedback and say, so I went to this particular platform, I reported in platform. So we actually teach them first reporting platform, so that if the authority actually does get to see it was reported in platform, then there will be a follow-up. Then they will tell us 2-3 days later, somebody actually got in touch with me and my issue was resolved, or I was given some guidance. And it is something that we're really encouraging, for them not to just report, not to block, because sometimes children will be like, I just blocked them and I decided, no, I don't want to do much about it. So we actually insist, don't just block and report, so that something is done. For instance, if it's an account that has been, shaming or bullying or doing something that is causing distress to a child, we need to be able to have as many people report that account so that something can be done. And it entails children and people who are feeling that I am having, and I keep explaining to children, telling them, it's called a red flag feeling, something that made me feel uncomfortable, I'm anxious. It made me just feel that I am unhappy. Right. Report it. Don't just block. Make sure you report. There's also, in addition to what she said in terms of the KSAT, there's a child helpline, a toll-free 1116. Yeah. And I tell them, if you can cram a whole song, I think 116 is a very easy number. I encourage parents to stick it in front of a fridge or the frequently visited places in the house where if you're not with your child at a particular time, you're giving them the responsibility to know, if I'm not here, you can call this number. If you're feeling unsafe, and somebody will actually help you. And that information actually does even go to the authority because they need to know what incidences were reported, how were they resolved. Yeah.
That's interesting. So making the children the first gatekeepers instead of fully relying on the parents, you know, because you can't always monitor what it is that
and
they're
you're not
doing.
always with them. Yeah.
Precisely. And I'll come to some of the mechanisms, programs that they can use and apps, you know, especially on devices. But let me come to you, Patricia, because, I mean, you're caught really in between not being too authoritarian when it comes to policing the internet space, but then also keeping children safe. You know, so trying to strike that balance, where do you kind of meet that sweet spot, if you will?
Okay. The mandate of Communications Authority of Kenya spans across, we have quite a broad mandate in terms of oversight over the telecommunications subsector, the postal courier, broadcasting, multimedia, cybersecurity, and also the issuance of frequencies. Now, on one hand, when we issue, for example, frequencies to our licensees, this comes with terms and conditions. So I would like you to see the responsibility spanning across the whole horizontal spectrum. So basically what a government does is it develops the policy. As an implementing agency, Communications Authority of Kenya implement the policy and also develop now regulations and guidelines that will stipulate or articulate the policy downstream. So the balance you talk about, I hear you and I agree with you. It's a delicate balance because one of our responsibilities is to facilitate development of the ICT sector in this country. Right. So we must have that in mind. But we also have an overbearing public interest in terms of safety of children. We recognize that children are early adopters of technology. We also recognize that they are vulnerable. And we also recognize that the internet is the biggest thing that has come to completely transform our life. So I think that balance can be created and maintained by ensuring every time we develop regulatory instruments, there's public participation of players such as Eveminet and others who have their inputs in those regulatory instruments. The other thing is to continuously invest in, I really thank our board in the management of the authority because the Child Online Protection Flagship Program has been one of the, let me call it great success in terms of the support, the resources available to continuously create awareness around these issues. And then maybe the last thing I can say is you just mentioned bringing the child in the center of this conversation. We are currently, I think, on the tail end of developing COP guidelines. And actually, we brought children from all the 47 counties in terms of listening to them. What would they want that space to be like? How would they want to be protected? What are the risks of vulnerabilities? So it's really coming down to where the issue is and continuously doing more.
Evelyne, our time is up, but I have to hear from you. What can parents do? They're watching and they're wondering, what can I put in place? What kind of safeguards can I implement?
I think this week I have been finding myself frequently saying that all parents need to, what our children need in terms of being safe is an informed parent. So parents need to be informed. And it's not about you, it's not about me asking you to be on TikTok so that you can consume. It's about understanding the nuance of the playground that your child is operating on, because that is their new playground, So even if you're telling your child to go outside and kick a ball, there's probably a phone out there that they will interact with. So their playground has become hybrid, quote unquote, and so it needs us to stop putting out fires and get to understand this is where I'm raising my child in, and I'm not going to take away the internet, I'm not going to take away the phones, because even if I'm not giving them from the house, they will still access them. So go ahead and find out what are these community standards I'm hearing people talk about, what does it mean? Because that is the guideline that you need to tell your child, when you're on this space, this is the responsibility the platform has given. Because the platforms also have a responsibility to create They are platforms that are going to be consumed by the children with the best interest of them at heart. They have to comply. So as a parent, you're the forefront of protecting your child. You're your primary caregiver. Yeah. You're the one who is giving the child. She talked about the statistics of mobile phones. We are buying them.
More phones than people in this country.
Right? Yeah. In fact, we have more phones in our houses than we have toilets, which should say something about, but we need to be able to find out. So if you're giving your child that phone, what is your expectation? Do they actually know your expectation? Be very clear. And I keep saying don't have gray areas. Then find out, okay, can we take one platform at a time? And at this point, it would be good for me to say that if your child is accessing live on TikTok, there's an integrity issue, because children under the age of 16, when they do put up an account, it is private by default.
Got it.
Which means this child is not able to have live. They can't have a live connection. They can't direct message, and they don't have access to be discovered. Nobody can go and search Victoria Rubadiri if they're underage and find them. Those are controls. Okay. There's a family pairing app on the platform that allows a parent to connect their app and their child's account, so that if your child, for instance, is in school and they posted something online, and you find there's a lot of negative feedback coming, you can control that, settings and all. So I keep saying, send yourself. In direct translation, jitume. Jitume meaning you have to be informed to know that it is your responsibility to make sure that your child's online experience is controlled and it is as positive as possible. Then push responsibility to them. By this, I mean, let them know at the end of the day, it is my responsibility to be able to know what I'm putting out there. I'm comfortable with it. Why? Because their digital footprint is their responsibility. I keep telling them in class when I'm teaching them, we would really feel bad as parents if we saw inappropriate content about you. Yeah. But whose content is it that is out there at the end of the day? It's yours. So before you post, be mindful at that moment. Is it necessary, really? And they need to start taking those pauses. Yeah. But again, I also tell parents, because what we are doing right now is creating awareness, we need to have a lot of grace. Because the people who are posting this content that we feel is harmful, they're people's children, just like the way I have my children at home. So we need to be able to have grace. Should your child find themselves that they have crossed a boundary, how do you bring them back gracefully? Because there is a point to learn, and there's a point where we need to continue parenting them in a way that they don't feel like they're not able to come back from what they did. Yeah.
All right, that's all the time we have. Thank you so much, Patricia and Evelyne, for coming in. But this is just the beginning. And like we said, normalizing these kinds of conversations so the children and parents have more agency over what happens in the internet. Let's take a short break here on Citizen Weekend. Here's what's coming up on sports.